Hi guys, so back with another 3D print, and today I'm printing a part of my tablet stand, and I'm going to be using the tablet stand to hold my tablet while I design and draw different things. So I'm just going to be telling about the print and about the 3D printer in general. So we have our bed, then we have our extruder, which is this entire contraption, then we have the nozzle, which is at the bottom. If you look at my screen, my nozzle is at 215 degrees, which will burn my hand if I even remotely touch it. The bed is at 60 degrees, so the metal part is going to be super hot, but I can touch right here and not burn. But if I touch the metal, I will burn my hand, and that's why they say not to. Most 3D printers will start your speed at 1. I like to run it at 0.6 until I get the base, and then I will speed it up to 1 because it doesn't need to be as intricate. If I'm doing a certain design like a logo, I might keep it at 0.6 or a slower speed because I want it to be more intricate. And I think I just hit pause, but as you can see, this is you have like little grooves in here, which then makes a base. And then for this one, which is the completed one, it's more solid. So right here, that's a solid piece, and that's a better base than right here, and it's gonna continue the base. So I'm just gonna let it keep going. And then you have your Z-axis, your X-axis, and then your Y-axis. You have 3 different axes for a 3D printer, and they all get controlled through Slicer software, and whatever Slicer software you use, and that's how it 3D prints. So this is layer 1, then this is layer 2, and then if you keep watching your 3D printer, you can see the different layers happen, and you can also see the different slices as the printer moves. So every single time you see like a new part of a layer, it will be different. And a lot of 3D printers and a lot of times when you do it, most people like to make it sturdy by making like a bunch of squares in the print. Even if it's not going to be a square print, you make half squares. And it's just like a general idea, because you have like a diamond here. You like to make it sturdy, so you try to use shapes that are like super sturdy, like squares, rectangles, and more four-sided shapes rather than just printing a hollow area. If you're trying to print something hollow, you can do it, and that's why you use something thin on the outside and you make it like an oval. But if you're trying to print something sturdy and that's going to be holding a lot more weight, and for a long period of time, most people use squares. So other parts, you have a disc up here which takes the filament, feeds it through this plastic tube into this area, which then feeds into the extruder, which then puts it on the bed of your cooling fan, because you don't want your nozzle to heat super hot, because there's not exactly control. You send heat to the nozzle and the entire contraption, but you have to keep it under a certain amount of temperature, and 200 degrees heat will go to the colder areas, and this is plastic is colder than the nozzle, so that it will be heating plastic up, and you don't want it to heat up the wires because you could burn them out. You don't want to heat up anything but the nozzle and the plastic, which is feeding through. And if you look closely, you can see how half of it is done and half of it's not done. So that, if you don't know if you can see it on camera, but it's a little shiny there, and that's because the extruder just printed that one line, and the filament's 0.04 or 0.4, so it's super thin and it's not very thick. So it takes like a lot of time to just do this. And as you can see, I can move this, and it's like a string. So if you guys have a guitar or any instrument, the highest string, the sharpest one and the thinnest one, that's what this pretty much is. And I probably shouldn't be messing with it, because then I misalign the plastic part, which has to cool down to the other plastic so it can mold together. And that's why most people let their print as soon as it's done off the bed. Most people let it rest for half an hour to an hour, because then it solidifies and everything is good, and then you take it off, and if there's something wrong with it, you have the ability to print it again. But usually, if something goes wrong like that, and it's not your printer because you printed other things and it worked just fine, you know it's your design, so you go back, fix your design, reload it onto the SD card, which is plugged into the side of this, and then you get it done, and then print it again. And most people test their 3D print because you're never going to get it perfect the first time, and that's just printing. You can print for years and still mess up on one thing, and it will change the entire print because that one little part. If you mess up on the base, the top won't be able to print evenly. If you mess up on the top, then you know what you have to fix. But on the base, you might have to fix other things. So if you mess up on the base, I recommend taking a look at your entire print again and definitely going through each layer in your slicer software to make sure that they all align, they all fit together nicely, and then go print it. And if it doesn't work, then there's just going to be another flaw in your design. Sometimes you might have to restart your entire design, but you never know until you do it. And we're just using an IIIP printer. You don't need anything fancy to print a lot of things. A lot of things you can connect. So if you're trying to print something big, you can just print it in sections and then connect it. And that's what a lot of people do, because you're never going to be able to print something super big unless you have a big printer. But those aren't usually something you can buy in a normal household because they're super expensive. And if you're just getting into 3D printing, you're probably not going to want to invest a lot, because then it gets too complicated. 3D printing can become a very complicated thing, because sometimes you can get more than one extruder, so you're going to have to be accounting for different extruders, where they're going, are they going to be at different heights, how is this bar going to move. So you have to account for a lot of different things if you're using more than one extruder, and then you have to account for different temperatures, and it just becomes a lot more complicated than which is usually user-friendly and just starting out. So I recommend getting a one nozzle 3D printer, basically nothing too expensive, because I can print great projects on here. I printed an Iron Man mask on here, and it looks really good, and I just have to paint it, but you can print amazing things on here. If you can, you might want to get a little bigger bed if you're trying to print something bigger and you know you're going to do it. So if you have experience in CAD and good at designing, and the only thing you have to figure out is how to put it into the 3D printer, I recommend, if you have the money for it, getting a little bigger one so you can upscale your projects. And then if you want projects and you find it, sometimes it's easier to print on a bigger scale instead of printing more projects on a smaller scale. And it's right here. Now it's just going back and forth. It's super quick. Like right there, you have your chain, it just keeps moving back and forth. But it's just printing a little part right there. It's hard to see, but that little part is different from that space part. And you can see the difference. And 3D printers are super cool because of how they print. 3D printers print in super thin lines. So if you think that you can do this in like a minute, you can't, because it's not like, it's thinner, it's like thinner than the point of a marker. And there's super thin lines, as you can see right here. That might be as thick of a strand of hair. So the 3D printers take a while to do it, and that's why I recommend starting at a slower speed to get your base done. Because the base is always the most important. If you don't have a good base, your entire project can't print well. So I recommend usually starting it at around 0.6. Sometimes you could start it at less if you're doing it like a bigger area and you have a bigger base. And then once you get your base done and it's been going for half an hour to an hour, then you can run it up to 1. Don't recommend anything more than 1 unless it's going to be, the 3D printer probably going to make it super sloppy. But most 3D printers, you can get it up to 2. And as you can see, if you look at the time difference, this is going a lot faster now because I set it on 2. And it's not going to be as intricate. And I like most products to be relatively intricate, or at least definitely sturdy, because I'm going to be using it holding my tablet. So I try to leave it at max 0.9 to 1. I usually leave the entire print from 0.4 to 0.7, and it's worked for me. Sometimes it might take a little longer, but that's fine by me as long as you just have time for it and just let it go. This dial is never going to be the strongest thing. It's a strong motor and it can pull it when it's tight if you run out, but I recommend leaving like a little bit of filament so this extruder, or not extruder, this has an easier time of pulling it. And whenever you start printing, if you see that this is coming out in like small lines, because most 3D prints you like to do, you want to start like a little line on the side, as you can see right there, to get the extruder working. you can hit this right here, press this in, push some filament through as it's extruding on the bed, and then you get your nozzle running, and then you can just leave it run. Once you get your base, which takes about 10 to 15 minutes depending on the print, for mine it took around 10 minutes, then you can just leave it be. You don't have to keep watching it. Some people have a monitoring software, which instead of using this to monitor it, you have it on your laptop, and then it gives you different details and tells you what layer on, and all you have to do is plug into a mini USB on the side, and then you can just monitor your 3D print. You can also monitor it from the screen as long as you know what you're looking for. So recommend looking at your layers when you're going to print it, and then you don't need your laptop to do it. You just need your SD card, and then you can just tell what layer it's on by looking at it. You're never going to know like 1 to 2 because it's super hard to tell, because you're trying to make it a solid piece. You're not trying to make something like a spring, like airy. So you can't really tell the layer, but you can definitely tell as it's going up. You might be able to tell within 5 to 10 layers on like what section it's on. And I know right here it already made the base, and now it's making a now this is the actual start of the print. You have your base here, which is a wider surface area to connect to the bed, so this part stays on. But I know this is the start of my print, and based on looking at it, these two so far what's printed is going to be the side of the it's a whole thing that I made that gets connected to other two parts, which is the frame and the hook. And that's pretty much the entire 3D print. So thank you, and watch next time, so like and subscribe.